So the first example states y equals negative 3x plus 2. This is a linear relation. So the domain is x can be any real number. The range is y can be any real number. The degree of a linear relation is always 1. That's the highest exponent. The sign of the leading coefficient. Leading coefficient is negative 3. So the sign is negative, which tells us negative slope. We can actually write negative slope here. Negative 3 over 1 would be the same thing, and that's going to help us graph this. Is it a function? Yes, lines are always functions. Negative 3 over 1. We're going to use that slope to help us graph this line. The first thing you do is plot your y-intercept. The y-intercept is 2. So you're going to put a point at 2. Then you're going to go down 3, so rise over run, down 3 over 1. And that's going to bring you to 1, negative 1. Now that you have 2 points, that's enough to graph the line. You can give me a little sketch of that line there. And that's sufficient. For number 2, you have a quadratic relation, negative x squared minus 5. Now, what's nice about this is you don't actually need to state this in factored form. Negative x squared minus 5, we know that the domain is x can be any real number. The range we're going to hold off on because we're going to look at our sketch first. The degree is 2. Any quadratic has a degree of 2. Sign of the leading coefficient. There's your leading coefficient. It's also negative. Is this a function? Yes. Parabolas are always functions. So how do we graph this? Well, this quadratic is actually stated in vertex form. And if we remember that from last year, this equation should look familiar. Y equals a x minus h to the power of 2 plus k. So what's going on here? We have a negative a value, h is 0, k is negative 5. The vertex is always going to be h, k. You have to change the sign of h. We don't have to worry about that here because h is 0. But we can state that the vertex then is 0, negative 5. So I'm going to plot that point there. Next thing you can ask yourself is, since the leading coefficient is negative, how does this parabola open? Does it open up or down? Well, it must open down because a is negative. So, as a simple sketch, I didn't ask you for any specific coordinates. You can actually draw a sketch of that parabola that way, and we can state our range. Y can be any real number as long as it is less than or equal to negative 5. So that concludes filling in that table. The next couple of examples are very similar. Look at the first video for help on how to factor quadratics. You may have to do that, well, you will have to do that in the next example of a quadratic in order to graph it with the zeros properly.